is that the current initiative is a directive while the proposal aims for regulation. I will refresh our memories about what these legislative acts are in the EU, because a directive is setting goals that every member state have to achieve, but it is up to the member states to decide how they are going to implement these, how they will transpose it to their national laws. In contrast, regulation is binding in its entirety and precisely and in its entirety has to be transposed into national law. So there is much less space for maneuver for member states in this regard. Now, what is the underlying reason for this proposal? First of all, one of the most important justification is that packaging and packaging waste has been ever increasing in recent years, which has been further exacerbated by the rise of on-the-go services and e-commerce. For instance, just to demonstrate this, in 2020, on an average, an inhabitant in the European Union generated 177.2 kilogram packaging waste. So it is a very big amount, but later on I will show you some more figures on this. Now, another important change is that while the directive of 2018 that's currently in force is imposing obligations on member states, this new regulation is increasingly and directly posing obligations on economic operators alongside member states. This also flows from the fact that in the context of previous directives, member states were often delegating their obligations in any case to economic operators. I will not go through all the new obligations of different economic operators because it would be very technical at this point, but I'm very happy to provide a fact sheet in a follow-up to this webinar if there is interest on it. However, I definitely wanted to touch upon the manufacturers' new obligations, because they will be required to ensure that the packaging they place on the market has been designed and manufactured in accordance with applicable requirements, among others on reusable, recyclable packaging. It is labeled according to the new requirements we will talk about later. It bears a badge, a serial number, or other element allowing for its identification. And furthermore, they will have to ensure that the QR code or other data carrier with their name is indicated with their name, registered trademark, postal address, and where available, electronic means of communication will have to be also on the packaging. Finally, it's an important novelty is that before placing packaging on the market, they will have to carry out a conformity assessment procedure to demonstrate compliance with applicable requirements of this new proposal, of this new regulation, and based on this, draw up a technical documentation. Based on the procedure, they will draw up an EU declaration of conformity, which they will have to keep for 10 years together with the technical documentation in case authorities would like to check the content, verify the content of these. Now, before we go further into the legislation, let's talk about what is packaging waste exactly. How do we define it? According to the new proposal, and it's building on the definition of waste as it laid down in the Waste Framework Directive of 2008, packaging waste means any packaging or packaging material which the holder discards or intends or is required to discard with the exception of production residues. As you can see on this figure, the volume of packaging waste in the Union has been steadily increasing throughout the last decade. More specifically, between 2009 and 2020, the generated packaging materials rose by more than 20.1% or 13.3 million tons. The most used packaging materials in the Union are paper and cardboard, followed by plastic, glass, wood, and finally metal. Now, in the followings, I would like to introduce you to the most main types of packaging formats. Which are also regulated in the directive and the new proposal, upcoming regulation. So when it comes to packaging, we have different types on the market. The most important ones are sales packaging, route packaging, and transport packaging. Sales packaging or primary packaging is a packaging conceived as to constitute the sales unit consisting of products and packaging to the final user or consumer at the point of sale. Group packaging or secondary packaging is the grouping of certain number of sales units at the point of sale. while transport packaging or tertiary packaging means packaging conceived to facilitate the handling and transport of a number of sales units or grouped packages, including e-commerce packaging, but excluding road, rail, ship, and air containers. As you can see, the picture on the bottom is well demonstrating the difference between the different kinds of packaging formats. And it is important to note that the 2018 directive doesn't include any reference to e-commerce. And this is the first time that e-commerce is specifically included and even defined in the context of packaging and packaging waste. Now we're going to go through the most important upcoming measures that are coming with this new regulation. First of all, by 2030, member states will have to reduce packaging waste per capita by 5%. And by 2025, a minimum of 65% of all packaging waste has to be recycled. By 2025, 20% of plastic, 25% of wood, 70% of ferrous metals, 50% of aluminium, and 70% of glass of all of these packaging types will have to be recycled. These recycling targets for member states were already present in the 2018 directive. However, the waste prevention targets are something new. Furthermore, from January 1st, 2030, all packaging will have to be recyclable, and from 2035, it will have to be recyclable at scale. Now, before we go further, I also wanted to touch upon how do we define recyclable packaging. Now, according to the new proposal, recyclable packaging is such packaging that is designed for recycling. It is effectively and separately collected. It is sorted into defined waste streams without contaminating other waste streams, and it can be recycled in a way so that the resulting secondary materials are of sufficient quality to substitute for the raw materials. Now, the Commission is planning to adopt delegated acts to establish design for recycling criteria and recycling performance grades. It is also envisaged that from 2030, packaging with a performance grade E, based on these delegated acts, will not be considered recyclable anymore. Now, another new novelty is that probably most of you have seen or received products in similar packaging, like as we see it on the bottom of the slide. Using a lot of void space provides the perception that the product is of a higher quality or bigger than in reality, and of course it also contributes to increasing amounts of packaging waste. To tackle this, the proposal introduces requirements to minimize packaging as much as possible, while the packaging retains its core functions. Economic operators who supply packaging to end users or final distributors will have to make sure that the empty space ratio is not more than 40%. So all these packaging formats with double walls, for instance, false bottoms or unnecessary layers, will disappear from the market. It is also important to add here that space filled by air cushions, bubble wraps, styrofoam chips, and so on is also considered to be empty space. In the end, packaging minimization is generally considered to be a positive new change, as it will not only reduce packaging waste, but also lower the costs associated with packaging material and freight. Another important new upcoming change is that the proposal or the new regulation will establish further restrictions on the use of certain single-use packaging formats, such as single-use packaging for fresh fruit and vegetables for less than 1.5 kilogram, or single-use hotel miniature packaging. Now, in the context of the single-use plastic directive, we already know that restrictions on the use of certain single-use plastic products, such as cutlery plates, food containers, were already established. Now, this is another round of restrictions, further restrictions on these. We are still assessing if this is we're still assessing this measure, because we know that many of the single-use packaging formats are highly recyclable, and they also facilitate hygiene and food safety, which are two essential functions of food packaging. A very important upcoming measure is that the proposal is going to establish minimum recycled content targets for plastic packaging formats. Counted targets per unit of packaging. As you can see, from the 1st of January, the plastic part in the packaging will have to contain a minimum percentage of recycled content for contact-sensitive, single-use plastic beverage bottles, and for all other packaging as well. Now, it's important that also these recycled content targets were previously present in the Single-Use Plastics Directive, but there it was only in connection to single-use plastic beverage bottles, and it was calculated as an average for all such bottles placed on the market, while the proposal counts targets per unit of packaging. Now, before we go further, I would also like to explain a little what is context-sensitive packaging is, because I'm not sure everyone is aware. These are very specific type of packaging formats in the scope of certain regulations and directives. They are in relation mostly to medical devices, cosmetic products, veterinary medicinal products, or dangerous goods, for instance. I'm also very happy to send a list of all these all relevant regulations and directives in this aspect. And an important upcoming novelty that we definitely welcome is that the proposal introduces mandatory modulation of producers based on the recycled content in their plastic packaging, which is important because this isn't widespread at the EU at the moment, and it will certainly provide an incentive for producers and some payback for their investments. Now, we also have to ask if these measures are indeed feasible or not. What we are still assessing also these new measures, but what we can see is that currently the uptake of recycled content in plastic packaging is quite low, which flows from multiple reasons. The most important ones, as you can see on the slide, is availability, price, and quality. What we know is that the availability of recycled plastics is limited, and they are very expensive. We received information that currently the price of certain plastic recycled materials is dependent on what the highest bidder is willing to pay, which is especially disadvantageous for small and medium-sized enterprises. While we know that virgin plastic is way cheaper, the recycled plastics are more expensive because the price of recycled plastics is generally high, as it depends on the cost of collection, sorting, and processing of these materials. And a third reason why companies prefer virgin plastic is the quality. Is because while PET bottles can be recycled today in very good qualities, it's not the same when it comes to other plastics such as PE bottles, when the resulting material will be usually grayish. So these are important questions we have to ask, and we also received feedback for some of our members that, for instance, in Spain, recycled plastics are only available on a limited scale and are approximately 25% more expensive than primary raw materials, and are of not a very good quality. So what is good news with regards to this, that the Commission is empowered to adopt delegated acts if it deems that the price or availability of recycled plastics makes it necessary. And finally, we also wanted to touch upon if chemical recycling would be the solution, as when it comes to recycled content targets on other plastics, we don't necessarily see how if the proposal is going to be feasible, as mechanical recycling currently is only available for plastic that are built from one type of polymer, while plastics made from several types of polymers or are contaminated are much harder to recycle. While chemical recycling is available for these types of packaging already, it's not widespread across the EU, and there is not enough scientific evidence, in our view, at the moment to promote this technology over mechanical recycling. Another very important upcoming measure is that the proposal establishes reuse and refill targets for a number of economic operators. And this is a new thing because in the current directive, member states are only encouraged to increase the share of reusable packaging placed on the market and of systems to reuse packaging. Now, first, before we go through the different obligations, I will also not touch upon all the obligations, just would like to share one example, and then I'm happy to again share a longer list because it's a very complex article. But how do we define reusable packaging? That's also a very important question when it comes to reuse systems. So according to Article 3 of the current directive, reusable packaging is packaging which has been conceived, designed, and placed on the market to accomplish within its life cycle multiple trips or rotations by being refilled or reused for the same purpose for which it was conceived. In the new proposal, it is also added that reusable packaging has to fulfill the requirements specific to recyclable packaging. Therefore, it has to be recyclable. However, at this point, the Commission doesn't provide for detailed guidelines on how to design reusable packaging, which will be definitely necessary in the future, hopefully coming in the next few years. Now, as you can see, there are many reuse and refill targets for different kinds of packaging formats. Let's go look at the first one. It's about sales packaging for final distributors who are making available in sales packaging cold and hot beverages filled into a container at the point of sale for takeaway. They will have to ensure that from 2030, 20% of these is offered in reusable packaging in a system for reuse or by enabling refill, and from 2040, 80% of these has to be offered in reusable packaging. This table is non-exhaustive, and as I mentioned, there are also targets for other products such as wine, water, and other packaging types like group packaging. What's very important is that the proposal provides an exemption for companies from meeting the targets if they fulfill one of three criteria. Either they have to be a micro-enterprise, so employing less than 10 people, they have to put less than 1,000 kilograms of packaging on the market per year, or they have to have maximum 100 square meter sales area, including all storage and dispatch areas. Now, we can also ask here if these targets are indeed feasible or not. Maybe some of you have heard that they have sparked harsh criticism from industry from many angles. Now, we have several points to bring up here too, because according to our knowledge, reuse systems are not always necessarily more environmental friendly than recycling itself, because of associated emissions coming from, for instance, transporting the cups or sorting processes. They also usually entail higher costs, which are usually associated for slightly higher storage capacities and for the take back and sorting. Furthermore, the health and safety concerns were a bit neglected in the proposal, as there aren't any guidelines on, for instance, the washing processes related to these systems. And finally, it's also another issue that many member states in previous years have already started to invest a lot in developing new recycling infrastructure in their countries. So now the sudden switch to reuse systems would also undermine these efforts and the huge amounts of investments that were made in these processes. So we will have to see. This is definitely a very critical point that's in the talks every day among stakeholders. Now, let's talk a little about extended producer responsibility. The current proposal will oblige member states to establish a register to monitor the compliance of producers on extended producer responsibility. And producers of packaging will be obliged to register in this register in every member state where they are providing products. But the producer responsibility organization can also carry out this for them. But I also wanted to explain what is extended producer responsibility, because I'm not sure everyone is aware of it. So extended producer responsibility can be defined as a practice policy approach which extends the producer financial operational responsibility of a product to include the post-consumer stage, or where the product packaging becomes waste. With extended producer responsibility, the producer of a product finances the cost of product disposal. This may take the form of physically collecting the products at the end of their life, or by using a producer responsibility organization. A producer responsibility organization is a third-party organization that collects and processes material. With a producer responsibility organization, the producer does not physically take back the product, but instead support the process financially. Now, we know that extended producer responsibility schemes are already established for products under the Waste Framework Directive, and the current directive in force on packaging and packaging waste also obliges member states to establish EPR schemes by the end of 2024. In most member states, this has happened, but these schemes work very differently across the Union, and practices differ on, for instance, how the waste management is carried out with regard to responsibilities of actors, divisions of tasks, for instance. And in some countries, such as Slovakia, for example, there are a lot of free riders who are not paying to the scheme and still marketing products. Also, the monitoring and supervision of these schemes is not sufficient in many countries. This can be especially burdensome for SMEs also when they want to market their products in the other member states, because of the costs can add up to 5,000 euros per member state, including registration, project management, and reporting costs. And as we mentioned, the 2018 directive already obliges member states to establish extended producer responsibility schemes for all packaging by the end of packaging waste by the end of 2024. However, an addition in the current proposal is that providers of online platforms allowing consumers to conclude distance contracts with producers will have to obtain information from the producers on whether they are registered in the national registry we mentioned before. And they will also have to obtain a self-certification from the producer, committing to only offer packaging where the extended producer responsibility obligations are met in the member states where the consumer is located. While France and Germany are already obliging online marketplaces to check whether their sellers are EPR compliant since 2022, this adjustment will ensure that large online marketplaces will be required to do so in the whole of the European Union. And as you can see, there is a great picture in the bottom of the slide that well demonstrates how EPR schemes work. Now, another upcoming, very important upcoming measure is that about labeling, is because, as you may have noticed, at present there are a lot of inconsistency in signing and labeling practices around the Union, which results in a great amount of packaging waste being discarded to the wrong bin or contaminating waste streams and affecting the quality and volume of recycled materials. There are examples of products where, in case of important products, for instance, the signings refer to waste disposal in the country of origin, or products where there are no markings at all how to dispose of it after its usage phase. The proposal is trying to tackle this by establishing minimum harmonized requirements on the labeling of packaging. From 42 months after entry into force of the regulation, packaging will have to be marked with a label containing information on its material composition. This obligation will not apply to transport packaging, however, it will apply to e-commerce packaging. And from 2 years after the entry into from 48 months after the entry into force of this regulation, packaging will have to bear a label on packaging reusability and a QR code or other type of digital data carrier that provides further information on packaging reusability, including the availability of a system for reuse and of collection points, and this will facilitate the tracking of the packaging and calculation of trips and rotations. The Commission is also planning to adopt implementing acts to establish harmonized label specifications for the requirements, and also a methodology for identifying the material composition of packaging, as mentioned before, by means of digital technologies. So this will be, in our view, a positive novelty of the proposal. And then another important upcoming measure is that by the 1st of January 2029, member states will have to set up deposit and return systems for single-use plastic beverage bottles with a capacity of up to 3 liters, and for single-use metal beverage containers for the capacity of up to 3 liters. This will exclude wine, aromatized wine products, spirit drinks, milk, and milk products. Member states will also have to endeavor to establish and maintain deposit return systems for reusable packaging and ensure that the return points for this packaging are not less convenient, more difficult for end users than opportunities to return single-use packaging. We generally welcome this new measure because it's been demonstrated that a well-designed DRS deposit return system provides great incentives for consumers to take back their packaging, to get back the deposit they made together with the bottles at the time of the purchase, and also assessments on existing deposit return systems in the European Union, because they exist, for instance, in Denmark or Finland, also prove that a consistent 90% return rate is possible with a well-designed deposit return system. So we are also generally welcoming this measure. And we have also reached the end of the presentation.